All right, great. There's been a trend in the British music scene as of late towards adopting third world sounds that involve, say, reggae, salsa, funk, and even gamelan music from the Java Islands. And amidst this, it would seem that the Stranglers are carrying out a sound that is very, well, the journalist here is calling it Caucasian, very white sounding. What would you think of this opinion?
Well, that's where we are. We still got a lot to find from our roots, but it's Caucasian, as you Americans put it. It's certainly Caucasian, but has anyone mentioned the fact that it's also that there's a lot of there is a slight third world feel in as much as there's the Spanish influence on this album. Has anyone picked up on that? Because there's an awful big use of Spanish guitars on this album.
Would you consider or perceive that in the same way you would, say, music from the third world? I mean, Spanish music, sort of more in a European type of vein.
Well, only because the Moors invaded southern Europe. The Moors are sort of third world, aren't they? African, you know, and then they went down to, and the Spanish influence went down to South America. In Northern Europe, any kind of Spanish sound is associated with South America as well.
Well, that does.
Certainly, we don't go out of our ways to be anything but non-European.
What do you think about the groups that are taking in sounds of that sort? Like say, the Clash at one time handled stuff like reggae and dub, and what do you think of this sort of an approach to current music?
Well, I think obviously that there's much to be gained from it, from an awareness that the world is much bigger than one's own frontiers, certainly. And obviously they didn't find sufficient in their own, a lot of all these groups, I mean including ourselves, don't find sufficient in just your own very narrow sphere of reference to be inspired from. But having said that, there's still, we consider ourselves to be quite a European group, and we think that there's still a lot to be gleaned from a European sound. But obviously I don't think the world for a musician is an international world, you know, so if there's anything to be learnt or appreciated from outside of one's own sphere of reference, I think that's only good.
So you basically deal with the European idiom. What other groups or performing artists do you see as, say, contemporaries operating within the same sort of genre?
Oh, there are lots in Europe. I mean, Kraftwerk and Düsseldorf, and then there's the French chansonniers. You know, the French chanson is alive and well. Thank you very much. But I mean, the grass is always green on the other side. So the attraction of exotica from abroad will always be strong, I think, to artists. And obviously, the attraction will be stronger to some more than others. With us, we're still just learning about our continent, you know, Europe.
So would you categorize the Stranglers' music as being more European than, say, simply British?
Oh yeah, for sure. I'd hate to just be considered as a British band. I think that I think anyway that the idea of the nation state is a bit retro. It's a bit of an old-fashioned cause, you know. And I certainly do believe that the idea of the next stage of evolution for us, certainly in Europe, is the United States of Europe.
Well, you talked about...
There are a lot of people who think that in Europe anyway. There are also a civil war soon.
Well, I sure hope not.
No, I think the war is going to be created by the others.
Meaning?
The outsiders in Europe.
Meaning?
Well, the people who are putting their missiles in Europe to fight their macho games here.
Maybe it could be a little more specific?
Non-Europeans are playing with the future of Europe.
I see. Well, maybe we'll get back to the music scene for a moment here, talking about all these different sounds being adopted by British and not in British groups. What do you think of this current music scene as opposed to, say, the music scene when punk was at its peak?
Well, if you mean, I don't know, I'm not too sure what you mean by that, because when punk was at its peak, you mean at its media peak, or actually in the streets, because there are more young punks now than there ever before in Britain.
Is that right?
Oh yeah, I mean, in '77 maybe it was the punk was the attraction for all the media, but certainly since then it's become, as the French say, c'est rentré dans les mœurs. In other words, it's become part of growing up almost in Britain now. You know, when you're at a certain age, the look, so to speak, and even some of the attitudes have rubbed off. It's become a normal thing. You know, for instance, in America, in the '60s, in the early '60s, to have long hair was quite a radical thing at one point. It represented something, and now, really, it's a norm, isn't it, more or less?
Oh yeah.
To have fairly long hair, or what would have been considered 15 years ago as outrageous, or no, 17 years ago as outrageous, it's become a norm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Lots of those things have entered the folklore, and the same in Britain with a lot of the punk things. Obviously diluted, but a lot of those ideas. I mean, the recession is even worse now than it was in '77. And I believe in America it accounts for 10%. The unemployment accounts for 10% of the working population.
Yeah, it's over 10 right now.
Yeah, and it's worse here than it was in '77. So obviously some of those attitudes, so to speak, are relevant, if not more so now than then.
Well, let's put it in these terms. At one time, the punk music was rather vital, whereas you say right now, it's just the fashion or the look is just sort of a part of growing up. What about comparing the punk?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, of course, it's diluted. I mean, you could compare it to the people who were actually wearing long hair or having the guts to protest in '65, '66 in the States. They were much more distinguishable than 4 or 5 years later when everyone had long hair, and it wasn't such a radical thing. You know, it wasn't such a risk.
So, what about the comparing, say, the music scene?
Am I shouting? Sorry, am I shouting?
No, it's...
I'm shouting here, but only because I think that you can't hear me.
Oh no, it's coming through very clear. It's shouting or speaking in a normal tone. Both are very clear. Thank you.
I don't normally shout.
Okay, well that's very good. Oh, getting back to this current music scene now, in comparison with, say, the '77 punk British music scene, how do the two stack up with one another?
We were sort of the missing link between pub rock and punk rock. A lot of what became known as the sort of purist punk groups were coming to see us when they still had long hair and flared jeans, because we had short hair and leather jackets and everything. We were sort of kind of the missing link, really. I remember seeing, Joe from the Clash and others from the Sex Pistols coming to visit us when they had their hair longer and things. idea for too long, so we made the songs as short as possible. Well, no, actually they were as long as we could maintain them, which was only about a minute at one time, and they were quite fast at the time. We played within our limitations, you see.
Yeah. Well,
and a lot of those, we were playing around London for quite a while before the sort of record companies got interested in the whole thing, the whole phenomenon, and a lot of these groups going to see us before.
Well, to paraphrase you there, back then, you were probably one of the few groups that did sort of have the guts to try something new, something energetic. Are there any people like that around anymore, or is it all just a pretty...
Well, I'm not sure. I haven't seen many. I'm sure there must be, you know, but I can't... you can't always... You're not always aware of things which are happening, like sort of little cancers, you know, until... especially if you're quite heavily involved in your own thing. I'd like to think that there's still always new things questioning the status quo. You know, in musical terms, especially, obviously, that's our frame of reference, I suppose. But certainly, a lot of the groups at the moment prefer to have. We consider them wimp rockers. Do you understand the word wimp?
Sure, we use it in America as well.
Yeah. Well, we consider a lot of the musicians at the moment to be wimp rockers, because they're quite happy with not seeing the world as it is, and just having the look is more important than what they're involved in. And I don't find that there's much commitment, I suppose, to anything. They don't feel... I suppose maybe it's a lack of sense of history or something, because, you know, in the past, however disposable popular music is, and one can never be sure how disposable it is, except in retrospect, obviously. I mean, Satie was doing some crazy things in the 20s with other people. You know, with burlesque, he was writing the soundtrack for Cocteau burlesque, and Picasso was doing the backdrop. They had no idea how disposable it was at the time. You see what I mean? And it's just a bit. At least those people were very committed to stirring a bit of shit. But it seems that at the moment all these wimp rockers don't seem to be too bothered with anything. We've released. I don't know if you've got it in Japan, any copies of it. We've released a kind of manifesto called the Oral Sculpture Manifesto.
Maybe you could fill us in on the details of that.
It's a bit long. It's a record which came out with the cassettes here, and also it's a sort of free record with the first, I don't know, 50 or to 100,000 albums, and it's slightly tongue-in-cheek, but it's also, you know, there's an element of seriousness in it, and it's the oral sculpture as opposed, you know, A-U-R-A-L, owl sculpture that is heard, and we kind of disassociate ourselves from all musicians contemporary musicians who we consider to be harlots and charlatans, who use art without being artists and abuse science without being scientists, and we heralding the advent of oral sculpture. And there's a few funny things in it. But we've released this manifesto just because we're a bit pissed off with the attitude of all these prancing, self-preening musicians.
Well,
considering themselves God's gift to God knows what, but to themselves probably.
Well, without stepping on any unnecessary toes or slagging off anybody that shouldn't be slagged off. Maybe
I won't then.
No, I was just wondering if you could perhaps give us a little more detail on this idea of the wimp rocker, exactly who and what you're referring to.
Well, I would have thought it was quite obvious, really.
Well, it could mean a lot of people.
Oh yes, it does. Wimp rockers. Well, it does say that the wimp rockers shall inherit the earth in the Bible, so I guess it's that coming true.
Okay, well, on that note, I guess I'll switch down to the next question here. I'm going to read you a quote from the Japanese journalist here who's provided me with the questions. He apparently believes that there's been a switch in your music from a sort of a social criticism type of viewpoint, more to the. There's been a switch to the more of the idea of personal politics. Would you agree?
Slightly, yeah. I mean, we have no. It's not just on this album. You mean?
He cites the change around the third or fourth album.
No. Certainly, this album, it's quite introspective, yes. But maybe there's a time when everyone should be a bit introspective. You know, there must obviously come a time every now and then, in fact, that when you start questioning yourself or looking into yourself. But we certainly haven't deserted the looking at the rest of the world, you know.
Well, if you would sort of label your music this time around as introspective, what would you call the music previous to this?
Well, Woos considered it to be fairly reportative.
Reportative in what sense? That you're looking around at the world and just reflecting what you see?
Yeah, however naively we interpreted it, and sometimes we might have interpreted things naively, that is, in as much as our information on certain subjects wasn't as, we weren't as well informed as someone else, you know. But I don't see why a musician shouldn't, or anyone in fact shouldn't embrace the cause of what they see around them. I mean, it's early on people were criticising us for even mentioning anything about politics or anything, and which I found a very dangerous attitude, because if that becomes the monopoly of just politicians, professional politicians, what happens to the notion of democracy? See, people were saying, oh, you should just write about love or this and that, but not the world, you know, socially or politically, which is a very dangerous notion, because that implies that there is a professional class of politicians, and other people shouldn't get involved in it.
So, what inspired this rather introspective direction this time around? Was it any change in your actual life, or?
Well, yeah, I'm sure there has been. Yeah, we were involved in at one point in something called the Men in Black, which was an attempt to correlate lots of phenomena, not only biblical phenomena, but contemporary sort of phenomena, and we tried to correlate them under one title, the Men in Black. I don't know if have you ever heard of the Men in Black phenomenon?
I haven't heard I remember the album very well.
No, so the Men in Black thing is a phenomenon which involves ufology, you know, and we tried correlating all in these related subjects in a single thing, and that wasn't the most successful attempt at information seeking. And I guess we've been, I mean, we're 7 years older now anyway, I think, something like that, than we were 7 years ago.
Just as
so obviously, sooner or later, one's going to look at oneself in a mirror.
Just as sort of a footnote here, maybe you could describe the Men in Black phenomenon in 25 words or less.
Oh, How many words did I just use then?
Well, all I know is it has to do with UFOs.
Yeah, it's nothing to do with UFOs, and I'd rather not talk about it because it's caused me too much grief.
Okay, well, we'll go on to the next question here then. What about the picture on the inner sleeve of the album with the people in the Stranglers t-shirts and whatnot?
Oh, yes.
Maybe you could explain that for us.
Yes, we, for the last 8 years, we have had a magazine called Strangled, and we have had a service called SIS, Stranglers Information Service, which is not a fan club. Because a fan club, I find the notion of a fan club, actual fan club, rather condescending. But it's been a service which has, over the years, has developed into not only providing information, but they found that people. Well, first of all, the magazine is written and contributed to by all the band, and also lots of people who we're associated with. You know, occasionally we interview people who work with us, whether it's in a recording capacity or whether they are supporting us on tour, for instance. And people we meet. You know, we write about America. Anything that we can expand on, which you can't always write about, you know. I mean, the lyrics are the last thing that anyone gets into in music, anyway, in contemporary music. It's the last thing they get into, and sometimes you still can't expand these ideas, so we try to expand them in Strangled magazine. Now, the information service from whence the magazine comes found that people wanted, a few years ago, people wanted a t-shirt with the raven on, for instance. So they started providing these t-shirts because other people were doing it at the same time.
I don't.
It's just they also SIS releases. We've written a few books mainly about prison, and well, we've written two. Jet's written a book, and Hugh's written a book, both about various prison incidents that we've got involved in. So SIS was a convenient means of publishing and releasing these books, you see. But at the same time, we publish other books, which, for instance, there's a very famous book here called Who Guards the Guards. It's about the whole prison riots in the late 60s and early 70s. And we've been issuing. We've been selling that through SIS for the last few years because a lot of people are interested in the British prison system, which would seem to be in great need of reform. In fact, the governor of one of the largest prisons in Britain, Wandsworth Prison in London, only a month ago resigned his governorship of that prison because he considered the British penal system to be really sort of bankrupt.
What about this SIS and Strangle? Does it have a full-time staff, or are these just volunteers?
It does. Yeah, it does. It has a full-time staff of 4 people, and sometimes in the summer we take on volunteers from schools or colleges. You know, when in the summer.
How many the magazines do you move, and how often do they come out? Strangle.
It comes out every 2 months, and we print up around. Well, it's anything between 5,000 and 20,000.
So it's a pretty healthy circulation then.
Well, it's healthy. It's also, if you've seen any of the magazines, it's anything but. It's not obsequious towards the Stranglers. In fact, in the last copy, we had someone a whole page saying why they hate the Stranglers. and it was very good reading, actually. His arguments were very valid.
Well, if with your cooperation there, maybe if you could send the record company a copy or two, we'd love to print some of the material there in our magazine.
You would want a few copies of what, to CBS, Sony, Japan?
Epic Sony.
Epic?
Yeah, Epic.
Epic Sony, Japan?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, sure. I can do that through the auspices of Andy Stevens.
Great. If you could send that care of Epic Sony to Rocking On magazine.
Rocking On. Oh, Rocking On. Yeah, I know Rocking On.
Yeah, well, that's who we're doing this interview for.
Okay.
Yeah, great. We'd appreciate that.
Okay, I'll get that done.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. I believe you're in the middle of a tour right now.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Near the end, actually.
How has it been so far?
It's been great. I think it's our most successful tour ever, actually.
What has accounted for that?
Fuck knows, mate.
What about your fans? I mean, are different people listening to you now than before?
Well, there's still a lot of people who've grown up with us over the last 6, 7, 8 years, and sort of you could call hardcore. But also, yeah, there is a whole new generation as well. It's quite interesting. Down the front of the stage, every night, there's the hardcore battling it out there, all in black, in their leather and everything. And then further back, there's loads and loads of European females.
I would imagine the European females are a new addition to the audience there.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I think there were always a few European females, but now they're much more obvious in vast quantities.
Has that changed your own attitudes and perception of your own fans? Not really. I haven't even thought about that actually, about any perception of our fans, so to speak. Fans. I don't know. I don't like that word, fans. Really. Well, let's. How about your listeners then? That way.
I haven't checked. No, it's broadened any perspective I had on them, I think.
What do you mean by broaden this perspective?
Well, because obviously there's a new element involved, but the old hardcore, so to speak, most of them seem to accept our sort of development as kind of a natural evolution. So it's just interesting to see new faces.
What about your future plans in terms of both touring and albums?
Well, it's a bit too early to say because the album, we're still just digesting this album, you know, so to speak. But excuse me. But as far as touring plans, well, we're going to America for 2.5 months.
Oh, really?
As from the end of March. And I'm not too sure about that. I mean, why doesn't someone invite us to Japan?
Well, hopefully they will. We're going to switch the tape over here for a second, if you could hold on.
Okay. Totally different areas, and it's, I think we've got a lot to offer each other. I mean, I'm not talking just for us, I'm talking for Europe and States now. Europeans and Americans. Two totally different races, really. In many respects. Attitudes are totally different, interests. But you know, as you Americans say, we I know where you're coming from, you know? Sort of thing.
Well, in that respect, do you think the Americans...
Clash of cultures, isn't it?
Well, absolutely. Do you think the Americans perceive your music differently than the Europeans then?
Oh, yeah, I think they'll... Well, I know in some places they think we're freaks.
Any other sort of responses you felt from America? Or even from...
Well, you know, America's such a vast place. There are different attitudes in different areas, and that's the fascinating thing about it. There's not one homogeneous... There's not one sort of real unified feeling there. I mean, on the East Coast, which is probably the most densely populated part of the States, they consider themselves to be East Coasters, and they look towards Europe a lot of the time, and the rest of America hates their guts, and San Franciscans are very
Midwest America, just out of curiosity?
Well, people always, all American films and that, or the Midwest is always the frightening element, the heavy, deep element of American society. And the people in the Midwest I've met in the past have been great, really more fun than a lot of the blasé Los Angeles people or New York people, there's a lot to be said for the Midwest. It's lovely, and the skies are not cloudy all day.
Indeed. We're going to switch on to another topic here. Apparently, you talked about a motorbike being a very important part of your life in a.
Oh yeah.
Interview. Well, what has a motorbike added to your life?
Pardon?
What maybe you could explain for us what a motorbike has added to your life.
It's yes, it's added lots of hassles with the police. It's also given me, it's when you're in a car, you have a false sense of security. Often, because you're enclosed. You don't realise, you don't feel all the wind. You don't smell all the smells and everything. A motorbike is a much more physical thing. Your body actually helps in moving that machine. It's more exhilarating, I think.
What type
of... Great way to see Europe. Or anywhere, for that matter.
When did you start riding?
When did I start riding? Oh, when I was 16.
And what are you riding now, the size of the bike?
Triumph Bonneville Thruxton.
Indeed. Another totally unrelated point here to the last thing, but do you ever consider yourself non-British?
Oh yeah, I don't. Yeah, of course. European.
What's the difference?
It's not as bloody narrow-minded. It's not living in the past. Because the notion of Europe is still a future notion.
What's inspired you to think that way? Why do you think it's going to be a single nation?
Well, hopefully it'll be a confederation of nations which will still preserve their individual interesting cultures. Which is fine, because who wants one culture to totally swamp all the others? That would be terrible. But certainly to be a confederation of nations, fine. And Scotland could have its independence again. And Ireland as well.
What sort of symptoms have you seen in Europe that would lead you to believe that the current state of things is leading to a sort of deterioration of individual nations?
Well, I don't... it won't be so much as a deterioration of individual nations. It'll be an evolution from that state, that primitive state, because there are various factors which might lead to that. Obviously the common market is just a historical process in the evolution of that concept. It's just very much like the Zollverein was just before 1870 in Germany. But also the fear of being destroyed by American and Soviet imperialism. Who wants to be... we don't really want to be the battleground for another world war.
And you honestly think things are pointing in that direction?
Oh, the movement against the... Americans are doing themselves a great disservice in Europe at the moment, Not without... And not least without with the help of the American president, who a year ago said, I don't see any reason why there shouldn't be a limited nuclear conflict just in Europe. People start getting a bit worried about when heavy guys say things like that.
So
it's kind of natural, They don't want to be... because they don't have much choice in the matter. So they see these foreign troops, and they just... The peace movement, however, I think the peace movement in Europe is well-intentioned, but I think it's very naive. But the peace movement in Europe is gaining momentum from day by day. So, you know, it's an election. It's an election. What do you call it? It's an important point of the elections in Europe, in Germany, in Britain, in Holland, in France. You know, the nuclear thing.
You mean
the placing of cruise and Pershing missiles and things. It's an election issue, if you want. What's the word?
You mean there's certain politicians advocating it and certain ones taking stance?
It's not so much. Well, it's not so much coming from the politicians. It's coming from the people. There are hundreds of thousands, but there are millions of, especially young people in Europe, who are out in the streets, you know, every now and then. I don't know if you've heard about some of the big rallies in Europe in the last year.
Oh yeah.
They're getting bigger and bigger.
Have you ever thought of incorporating this idea into your music?
Well, we have been involved in something like that. We were involved in the CND album, and we've been involved in a few things like that, and No Nukes in front of 30,000 people in Holland last year. But the only thing is, the CND isn't going far enough, because it only wants unilateral, you know, the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, CND, is only going for unilateral disarmament, which is very silly, I think. It has to be multilateral.
And so, are you working at this through both your magazine and your music then?
Sorry?
Are you working for this goal through both your music and your magazine or that information service?
Oh yeah, anywhere where we can stick our propaganda anywhere, sure. That's normal, isn't it?
Well,
wherever it can manifest itself, we'll do so.
So is that your one major cause now, or do you have any other causes?
Causes? Oh, there are a lot of causes. That's a very highfalutin term. A lot of things we're involved in, which we believe in, for sure. I think in that respect we're normal, well-balanced Europeans, in as much as we have opinions on a lot of things. And our way of manifesting our opinions is through the music, obviously. Well, in some measure through that medium, anyway.
I see. You're very famous for your hatred of journalists. Am I correct?
Am I?
Well, let's just say we've read things over here. What has caused this?
It's not. No, I don't think it's a hatred of journalists. It's just a dislike. I don't suffer fools gladly. Just a dislike of arseholes, as you say in America. Assholes, you know. And occasionally, I've met less journalists I haven't wiped off the face of the earth or beheaded or anything, you know. There have been one or two who've been really idiotic and silly, and I thought I'd have fun at their expense, so to speak.
What caused them to appear to be assholes in your eyes?
Well, they were just plain silly, actually. They weren't. They kind of insulting me sometimes with their lack of, lack of finesse in questions. I don't know. It's very difficult to put it down to any one thing, but I remember one journalist was so rude to my colleague Hugh that I thought I'd kidnap him for a few minutes, you know, and force him to listen to some music.
What actually happened?
One chap has been to do an interview with me for 6 months, and he was very rude about Hugh, and also the groups. I went on a tour called the Euroman Cometh Tour, a mini solo thing, and I had these very interesting electronic groups at the time. This was way before the electronic explosion over here. So, excuse me. So he'd written some very scathing things about these people, and I felt that he'd obviously not listened to them properly. So I combined the fact that he wanted to interview me. I arranged to meet him somewhere one day, and he turned up at the said meeting place, and there were two of my mates there who said, "Come along with us. JJ's waiting for you in his coach in the bus going off to 100 miles out of London or something." So they came along. He went in the coach, and we just told the coach to drive fourth driver, with him in it, starting to panic and everything. And then we just locked him up in a little room by the side of the stage until it was really time to go on stage, and then for a few hours, and then just forced him to sit on the stage with about, 6 or 7 Finchley boys sort of behind him. He was sitting in a chair on the stage, and he just jumped off the stage, ran into the crowd, disappeared into the night to the police station, and I had to hide in in a girl's dressing room in a wardrobe while the police were searching for me. It was silly.
Were charges ever?
Thereafter, my photograph was banned from various newspapers for over a year in Britain, and and so whenever they depicted the Stranglers were a 3-piece group.
Is that right?
It was just a silly thing.
Where was he a journalist from? What magazine?
Record Mirror at the time.
Is that right? That's hilarious.
And I remember at the same time, John Osborne, the playwright,
Yeah, I've heard of him.
Yeah, John Osborne, the playwright, formed Artists Against Critics or something association, where every year they decide on their least favourite critic, playwrights and writers, and then give him a good thrashing.
Huh.
In the traditional British sense, or I don't know, or maybe they just stick a custard pie in his face or something.
There seems to be a lot of anti-journalism feeling among musicians in Britain. Is this because of the contemptuous style of the journalists over there, or what?
The British artists are so negative. British critics are so negative, and so fashion conscious, and so it's amazing compared to other journalists from other countries who have got a much healthier attitude. Maybe it's just a symptom of the decadence of Britain. Oh, I've got a great, while I can remember it, great quote from Edward Gibbon. The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
Listen to this then. I'm trying to remember. A cloud of critics, of commentators, of compilers darkened the face of learning, and darkened the face of learning, and the decline of genius was soon followed by the corruption of taste.
I see.
That was from, I think, Chapter 3, Edward Gibbon, Decline and Fall of, or something like that. Yeah. Definitely one of those things.
Well, I think it's worth checking up on that then.
Yep.
Let's see. I've been handed one final question here that you might consider rather off the wall. Journalist here next to me wants to know if you, without getting too personal, of course, whether you've ever actually experienced love or a love relationship. Without getting too personal, of course. I don't want to delve into private matters here.
Oh, that's very genteel of you. Obviously, you spend a lot of time in Japan.
Yeah, that's right.
Great. No comment.
Well, okay. Okay, we'll leave it at that. Here, one last question here then. He wants to know what, besides riding motorbikes, you do in your free time.
Yakushinkai Karate. And, well, I think that's equally as personal as the last one.
Okay. Well, we'll leave those both on the bookshelf then, and
okay.
I think wrap things up. I want to thank you very much for your time today. I understand you have a concert later today. And,
Yeah.
I wish you the best of luck, and look forward to look forward to seeing the Strangled magazine there, perhaps in the next couple of months.
Okay, so Epic Sony Japan.
Right, and that's 2 Rocking On magazine, care of Epic Sony.
2 Rocking On magazine. Okay, yeah.
All right, well,
Great.
thank you very much for your time then.
What time is it there, please?
It's 11:30 at night here, and it's the 15th.
Is it very warm there?
It's freezing.
Oh, good.
By the way, any idea of when you're going to make it over here?
Well, no. I'd like to think that someone might advise us there in the autumn, but who knows?
Well, we'll definitely put that in the interview there, just in case we can attract any promoters.
Great.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your time, and please take care.
You're welcome.
Okay, then,
Bye.
bye-bye.